Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Black Panther Wakandan King. He is a 2-mana 2/2 with first strike. He says whenever Black Panther or another creature you control enters, put a 1/1 counter on target land you control. Then you can pay 3 mana, move all 1/1 counters from target land you control onto target creature. If one or more 1/1 counters are moved this way, you gain that much life and draw a card. So this is counters, lands, and tokens. So, why play Black Panther? He's a 2-mana 2/2 with first strike, and he's always going to be our turn 2 play. Like, there's not really much else we want to do turn 2 other than play Black Panther. He's so good, he's a great blocker. If he dies, he was 2 mana, it's still fine. Him entering counts himself and all other creatures, so usually there's restrictions on non-token creatures. He just counts him and other creatures we control, which is really, really good. He also can activate his 3 mana ability at instant speed, which is very, very powerful. It's a great combat trick, which is kind of like the whole principle of the deck is winning through combat tricks. So really, let's say you have 5 counters on a land, you attack with Black Panther or whatever other creature an opponent has declared their blocks. Anything that's going to get through will be like, okay, 3 mana, that thing's now +5/+5, which is really cool. It's a great combat trick. Also, what we could do, which is something interesting, is I don't think we want to do it, but it can be very fun. Move all 1/1 counters from target land you control onto target creature. We could just maybe kill someone using an opponent's creature. It wouldn't be recommended, but like they wouldn't think that we would do that to someone else's creature, right? So it's like a super combat trick. The life gain he does can let us be more aggressive. Like if we have like 10 things, like 10 tokens enter, like we could just basically 3 mana instant speed gain 10 life, which is really cool. And then we can like kind of full more swing out and not die on the crackback. And then the card draw can help just kind of keep us consistent, help us like enable it, because we don't want to pay 3 mana just for like nothing. Like 3 mana is a pricey combat trick. So drawing a card is also pretty good on top of that. It's just something to do too on the end of someone's turn if we'd like. Here's the game plan. We don't need him. He's really, really good. Don't get me wrong. The deck is built around him. Without him, we miss out on the fun counter lands, the fun everything else. It slows us down a little bit. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, we're just a token deck. We make a lot of tokens and we can still win with that. So early game, we want to play Black Panther. Just he's turn 2. That's what we want to do. Mid game, we want to start dropping as many dudes as we possibly can and then start swinging. Late game, we want to start throwing counters on. Like we don't want to just say, okay, it's turn 4 or whatever. We don't want to pay 3 mana on turn 4 or 5 and put like 2 1/1 counters on something and gain like 2 life and draw a card. It's still not bad, but like we want to go for a big swing with like basically a combat trick. And that's how we want to win. Channel and deck stuff. The deck is like $450 at the making of the video. There's a bunch of cards in here that you could always cut to make it cost way less. For example, Ocelot Pride is in here. Ocelot Pride's like $40. You cut Ocelot Pride, it goes down a lot. You can get the cards you need from the link down below through the affiliate link. Always appreciate it when you do. Helps the channel. And then to really help the channel, like, comment, and especially subscribe. I always read the comments. I respond to them all. I always appreciate it. That's the typical YouTube spiel. Let's go to it. No planeswalkers, no battles, creatures. Abzan Falconeer is great because he can outlast if we want, but each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has flying. We're like a counter deck, so we kind of want to do that. Give all our guys evasion is cool. Adeline is nice. So some of the cards are here through various different reasons because we care about tokens and we care about counters. Abzan Falconeer is a guy that is going to make our guys with counters way better by giving them flying. Adeline is great because when she attacks for each opponent, we're going to make a tapped 1/1, which is now 3 counters onto a land, which now beefs up our counters and tokens. So it's, you guys kind of get the idea. We want to amass tokens. We want to amass counters. Hopefully, we want to put counters on Adeline, make her big, make her live forever. Arwen's pretty great. Each creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of additional 1/1 counters on it equal to her toughness, which is 1, but then we put counters on her, so now all of our guys enter with way more counters, which is even better. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, is pretty cool in the deck. Power and toughness equal number of lands you control. It doesn't matter. Irrelevant. Non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. That now means that whenever a creature enters, we can put a counter on one of our other creatures because that creature is also a land in addition to its other types, which is pretty cool. So now, instead of putting them on lands and then moving, we now have the option to just put it straight on the creature and beef it up from the get-go. AOZ is great, enters the battlefield, make a bunch of 0/1s. So in a vacuum, right? Let's talk about this in a vacuum. We have 7 lands, we hardcast him. We get 7 dudes plus him, so we get 8 creatures entering. That's now 8 counters onto a land, which is great. And then whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 1/1 counter on each plant you control, which is still just a little added benefit. Really, really good. Basking Brood Scale. Devoid, adapt. Devoid's irrelevant in the deck. Adapt, 2 mana, put a counter on him. Put a counter on him if he doesn't already have a 1 counter on him. Whenever 1 or more counters are placed onto him, you may make a 0/1 Eldrazi Spawn Scion. So just by putting counters on him, make us little mana dorks, which now put a 1/1 counter onto a land. You know, no, that's not funny. I was thinking for a second, maybe a Shy and him are infinite, but like, no, that's not infinite. Wait. It is with Ashaya Basking. I'm learning this right now. Ashaya Basking Brood Scale and Black Panther are infinite because everything is a land. A creature enters the battlefield, which now puts a 1/1 counter onto a land. Basking Brood Scale is that land. You then put another 1/1 counter on that land. So you have infinite Scions until you decide. You have infinite Scions, and you have infinite colorless mana, and you have basically infinite counters because of that. We're learning this deck together. That's kind of fun. Bristly Bill, so great. Landfall, whenever a creature enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on it. I'm going to say we're not really a landfall deck. We do care about lands. There are some very interesting lands you'll see later in the synergies they have, but he's just good to enable things with 1/1 counters to really start speeding things up. And since we are a counter deck, we want to double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature we control. That will straight up kill someone. That is a combat trick that'll end the game. Champion of Lamholt, absolute all-star in our deck. Now with 3 mana 1/1 is no good. Creatures with power less than it can't block creatures we control. And then whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, put a 1/1 counter on Champion of Lamholt, which is super good because it basically reads our board as unblockable, which is great. Conclave Mentor, if you would put a 1/1 counter on a creature, add another one basically, and then whenever he dies, gain life equal to his power. So pretty good, you know, and we have a lot of like Champion of Lamholt and Conclave Mentor effects where Champion of Lamholt enables itself, puts a 1/1 counter on it, and now gets another one with Conclave Mentor. Same thing with Bristly Bill, puts another one. Those are good effects. Dr. John Seward, or really Torrens, Fist of the Angels, is super good. He has training. Training's not really relevant in this deck. It just isn't. It puts a 1/1 counter on a creature with power less than it when it attacks. It doesn't really matter. Whenever you cast a creature spell, make a 1/1 green and white human. So basically, we're doubling up our counters we're putting when we have Black Panther on the field, which is great. And also, we're a token deck, so now all of our non-tokens have a little 2-for-1. Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. If a permanent entering the battlefield caused a trigger ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it happens again. Permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanents your opponents control to trigger. It doubles up all of our stuff, and it nullifies all of our opponent's stuff, which is really, really great. Doesn't work with Dr. John Seward or Torrens or whatever you want to call him, but it does work with Evolution Sage. Say, for example, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. Great. We now proliferate all of our counters on all of our lands and all of our creatures, which is cool. And if we have Elish Norn on the field, we now do that again. So we kind of get double the value. Evolution Witness, the same logic as the Basking Eldrazi lizard, I forget the name of. Adapt, you know it. Whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on Evolution Witness, return target permanent card from our graveyard to your hand, which is great because we can just keep putting counters on it and we can keep recurring our stuff. One of the things we can recur is Giggling Skitterspike. I love this card. I think he is so cool. He's so spooky. 4 mana 1/1 indestructible. Whenever he attacks, blocks, or becomes the target of a spell, it deals damage equal to each opponent equal to his power. Great. The cool thing about it is when we are putting a lot of counters on thing, he's just going to be a huge menace, and he has built-in indestructible. So in a world where we're like, okay, we're going to move 10 counters from a land onto Giggling Skitterspike. Now he is an 11/11. I'm going to attack. Each opponent's going to take 11 damage just because he attacked. And then they're still going to take the combat damage is really crazy. Gyre Sage is pretty cool. It has Evolve. 2 mana 1/2. You tap it to add a green to your mana pool for each 1/1 counter on it, and then as creatures enter, they get bigger and bigger. That's how it functionally is supposed to work. But we're going to put 1/1 counters on it. We're going to have it start tapping for a bunch. So let's say, for example, we want to be like, okay, we want to pay 3 mana and we want to move 5 counters onto Gyre Sage. We gain 5 life, draw a card, and now Gyre Sage taps for 5 mana, functionally netting us 2 mana, which can be pretty cool. Illustrious Wanderglyph. Illustrious Wanderglyph. It's basically Tendershoot Dryad, but an artifact. A little bit better than that. Ascending is if you have 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing. You have it forever. Other artifacts, creatures you control get +2/+2 if you have the City Blessing. And then at the beginning of combat, each upkeep, we make a 1/1. This is really nice to be able to just make basically a 2/2 for free on every upkeep, ours and our opponents included. And then since we're getting a 1/1 on every upkeep, that's going to get an extra 1/1 counter onto a land with Black Panther. Incubation Druid is great. Taps for a color, any color of a land that could be, that we could produce. However, if it has a 1/1 counter on it, we can tap it for 3. Now, normally you'd have to pay 5 mana to make it a 3/5, and then you can tap it for 3. However, we have a ton of ways to just put a single 1/1 counter on something, and now it taps for 3 right away. Jacked Rabbit has Ravenous. Ravenous is... It's so good. Ravenous is basically, he enters with that many extra 1/1 counters, and I think if it's 5 or greater, you draw a card. Something like that. But either way, he enters with a bunch of extra 1/1 counters. Whenever Jacked Rabbit attacks, create a number of 1/1 white rabbit creature tokens equal to his power. So in a vacuum, he is a 1 mana 1/2. You attack, you make a 1/1. Fine. However, when we put a bunch of counters on him, and we attack, we'll be making like 5 on a bad day. We'll make like 5 1/1s, and we'll now get 5 more counters onto a land, and then we can even move those onto Jacked Rabbit for next turn and get even more rabbits. Whew, great. Kami of the Whispered Hopes, if 1 or more 1/1 counters will be put on a permanent you control, that many +1 are added, and then you can tap it to add X mana of any one color where X is the power. Kind of the same deal of just put a bunch of counters on it, tap for his power. It's basically better Gyre Sage in my opinion. Kodama of the West Tree, reach, modified creatures you control have trample, and since we're putting counters on stuff, they're going to be mostly modified. So it gives all our guys trample basically, and then whenever one of our creatures deals combat damage to a player, we're going to search our deck for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped. So he ramps us. So pretty good almost at any point in the game. Kutzil Malamute Exemplar, your opponent can't cast spells during your turn. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control power greater than its base power deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Let's unpack this dude. So your opponent can't cast spells during your turn. We want to win with combat tricks. We want to be able to just be like, okay, you look vulnerable, I'm going to attack you, and I'm going to move a bunch of counters depending how you block. Great. We don't want to, our nightmare in this deck is essentially, I'm going to move 10 1/1 counters onto this creature, and then someone kills it, and then nothing happens. So it's like, okay, you just wasted us 3 mana and killed our creature. So we kind of got 2 for 1. Our opponents now can't really do that. And then more importantly, whenever 1 or more creatures you control have power greater, it's basically any creature with a counter on it now has greater power and toughness than its base power. So when it connects, we'll draw a card. Mana Gorger Hydra is so epic. 3 mana 1/1 with trample. Whenever a player casts a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Mana Gorger Hydra. This card is just like a threat by itself. Even if you try to kill it, it gets a little bit bigger, and then you probably kill it because it doesn't have any inherent protection. However, it's just good because it can get really, really big, really, really quick. It's kind of everyone's big worry. So the way I'm thinking about this card, right, is it's a decoy and it isn't. Someone's going to put a kill spell on it to try and get rid of it because Mana Gorger Hydra is insane, and then while they're trying to get rid of it, we can just beef up something else. It's kind of like a red herring because Mana Gorger Hydra is so good that you might think we're going to put 1/1 counters on it, but we never will because we can just put it on something else. And Mana Gorger Hydra gets huge regardless. Metastatic Evangel, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. Add an extra one of all of our counters, add an extra counter on our lands, really good. Ocelot Pride is a pricey card, but I think it's really, really good in the deck. A 1 mana 1/1 with First Strike and Lifelink and Ascend is really good, it's fine. At the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, create a 1/1 cat creature token. Then if you have the City's Blessing, for each token you control that entered the battlefield this turn, create a token that's a copy of it. Whew. At the very worst, if we gain life this turn, it's a first striking lifelink, so we probably will, because who wants to block it, and then we do a combat trick on it by moving counters onto it. We're basically going to be getting an extra 1/1 every turn, and then we almost always will have the City's Blessing because we are a token deck, and that happens pretty easily. We're going to double up all the tokens that entered, so any token generator that we have is now doubled up effectively if we gained life. Reluctant Role Model, super cool card. Survival at the beginning of your second main phase. If he's tapped, put a flying, lifelink, or 1/1 counter on it. Whenever it or another creature dies, if it had counters on it, put them basically onto another creature, which is really nice because it's kind of like a safeguard. If we put, say, 10 1/1 counters on one of our creatures and then that creature dies, we can at least do the old switcheroo and put it onto something else, which is very nice. Shalai, Voice of Plenty. Planeswalkers we control and our other creatures have hexproof, and then at instant speed we can pay 6 mana to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. It's great for the protection. We're probably not going to be doing its big ability too often, but it's still something like, we're holding up 3 mana to move a counter or whatever. Or it's like we attack out and we have no real other combat trick. We can at least put a 1/1 counter on everything so we can try and close out the game. It's really good either way. Sovereign Okinik Ahu. I pronounced that wrong, probably. He has Ward 2, which is almost hexproof. Whenever he attacks, for each creature you control with greater power than its base power, put a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to the difference. Crazy. Let's say we have a 2/2. And let's say we have Reluctant Role Model, and we have three 1/1 counters on Reluctant Role Model. We attack with Sovereign. Reluctant Role Model, since it's difference between the 3 1/1 counters to the 2 base power, so its total power is 5, the difference being 3, we're going to put an extra 3 1/1 counters on it, now functionally making it an 8/8. So he's basically going to double up all of our guys, which is very, very good. And he counts himself too, which is also nice. Tendershoot Dryad is basically the same thing as Illustrious Wanderglyph. It's a little bit worse, I guess. A little bit better. I don't know. You can argue it either way. Ascend. At the beginning of each upkeep, make a 1/1. So we're getting basically a free 2/2 every single upkeep, which is nice. And we're getting an extra, an extra token and an extra counter every single upkeep onto a land. Vorinclex, Trample Haste. We double up all of the counters that we would put on a permanent or player, which is really great. And then if an opponent would put a counter on something, they put half that many rounded down. So we double ours and our opponent's half theirs. One of the notable things about Vorinclex is Vorinclex says onto a permanent. Some of the other cards you will see, like the Shattered Spire Ozolith or Conclave Mentor or whatever, if they only care about artifacts or creatures, and we're putting 1/1 counters on lands, Vorinclex is going to double up those counters, so it's going to be very nice. Walking Ballista is kind of a cheeky way to win. Enters with X 1/1 counters on it, pay 4 mana, put a 1/1 counter on it, and then you can remove a 1/1 to have it ping any target. So a cool way to think is we just put a bunch of counters on it, and then we just kill things we don't like or kill players we don't like. So he's just super versatile. The final creature is Witch Enchanter. Which one? That one. Enters the battlefield, pop an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. It's a land on the other side. I didn't want to. Figured you guys get it. It's just good. It's good for a land if we want to start loading up a land, or it's just a creature when we need it, which is good either way. Going into sorceries, we have Awaken the Woods. Create X 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens. Since these guys, it's kind of funny because they enable themselves. So let's say we have 5 lands enter. We now get 5 triggers from Black Panther, so we can put them all on one. We can scatter them around, say each basically enter with an additional 1/1 counter. We can load up a different land. It's pretty cool. Damning Verdict, destroy all creatures with no counters on them. It's a nuke on a bad day. On a good day, it's a one-sided board wipe to our opponents because hopefully all of our creatures have counters on them. Explore is good. You may play an additional land this turn and then just draw a card. It's fine ramp, it's card draw. It's good really at any point in the game. You draw it early game, great. Maybe that's our turn 2 instead of playing Black Panther. We draw it like turn 7, okay, well, we play it, drop a land maybe. It's essentially a cantrip. Finale of Glory can win the game, maybe. Create X 2/2 white soldier creature tokens with vigilance, and then if X is 10 or greater, make they're actually just 4/4s flying with vigilance instead. It's really good at either point. Even just paying like 5 mana for like 3 2/2s with vigilance is still pretty fine. And then because those 3 2/2s are now going to give us 3 counters onto a land, which we can then move, which is great. Or they're just a bunch of 4/4s that will probably end the game. Nature's Lore and 3 Visits are basically the same. They search your deck for a forest card and put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. It's interesting because there's 3 cards we can really get. We can get Canopy Vista if we have a bunch of basics, or it's just early game and we don't care. We can get Temple Garden. Basically, these are going to cover both colors by ramping in 1. Or it's going to get Dryad Arbor, which we will see in a little bit. Going into instance, we have Arachnogenesis. It's a nice instant speed ability, and I put a bunch of instants in this deck because the idea is that everything we do with Black Panther's functionally a combat trick, so you want to be able to hold up and have a lot of options. If an opponent attacks us, create X 1/2 green spiders with reach, where X is the number of creatures attacking us, and then prevent all damage that would be dealt by non-spiders this turn. It's a fog that makes us a bunch of dudes. And the cool thing about it is prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by non-spiders. So since we just made a bunch of spiders, we can block and kill whatever they attacked with. And then since we're making a bunch of dudes at instant speed, we counter up with Black Panther onto a land. You get the drill. Beast Within, just to get rid of something we don't like, they can have a 3/3. Dawn's Truce is good because we can have our permanents, us and our permanents have hexproof until end of turn. And then if someone decided to nuke, we can make someone else draw a card, and then our permanents will also get indestructible. It's really good just if someone's like, if we move our counters onto something, and someone's like, okay, I want to kill Black Panther, or I want to kill whatever you put the counters on. We can at least have protection on it, and if someone wipes the board, everything's safe. Flawless Maneuver, again, since Black Panther comes out turn 2, we should almost always have him on the field. So basically we can just give our creatures indestructible for free. Generous Gift is just the white version of Beast Within. And you know what I will say about Generous Gift? It's a gripe I have with Wizards. Why did they make it a 3/3 elephant? Or sorry, a 3/3 green elephant. Why didn't they make it a white elephant? It's, it breaks the color pie. I don't care. It's flavorful. I'll die on that hill. Grand Cassendo is so sick. Let's read it. Create X 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Great. At the very worst, that's what it does. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So we can either for white, and then pay X as 0, make no dudes, and then just have our creatures be indestructible, which is really good. Or if someone board wipes, we can be like, okay, we're just going to pay like, I don't know, 5 mana into it maybe. Why not? 5 mana is always a good number. Make 3 dudes, get 3 counters, and then our guys are safe. It's good. Did I add Grand Cassendo twice? Guys, there's only one Grand Cassendo in the deck. Oh well. Heroic Intervention, 2 mana, permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible. It's good if someone tries to blow up our stuff. I've been starting to follow the philosophy of it doesn't matter if someone wipes the board as long as we have protection for our stuff. It's okay if someone wipes the board because they're just wiping everyone else's stuff rather than dealing with like counters or whatever. I like the idea of just being like, our guys are okay, everything else is gone. Inspiring Call, draw a card for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible. That's a lot of card draw, and it just keeps our guys safe, which is super great. March of the Multitudes is such a great card. Create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink, and then it has Convoke. Your creatures can help cast the spell, basically by tapping it, and it pays for 1 color. So, ideally, we tap all of our mana and we tap all of our creatures at instant speed to make a ton of 1/1 dudes. This could be something small of being like, okay, we made 5 guys by tapping all of our mana and all of our creatures, or it could functionally double everything we have at instant speed, which is great, and it still does the counter stuff. Path to Exile, get rid of something we don't like, exile a creature. They can have a land. Ideally, it doesn't really matter that much because it doesn't matter, I guess, just because we don't want them to gain life that much. We want to beat him down, but it's okay because you'll see swords in a second. Secure the weights. Short, sweet, to the point. White, pay X. Put 1/1 white dudes. White dudes, God. Put X 1/1 white warrior creature tokens onto the battlefield. I gotta be careful with that. At instant speed, which is really great just because it's just 1 mana, pay X, dump all the mana you have, make a bunch of guys, get a bunch of counters, and then beat down later. Swords to Plowshares, just target creature, exile target creature, they can gain some life. It's too good to not have, although we don't want them to gain life, but it's still like okay if they get like a 2-drop. It's still fine because whatever we're swording is too problematic to just have on the field. It's more important that the opponent has like 5 life or whatever rather than us dealing with that. Unbreakable formation is great, just our creatures get indestructible, and then if you cast a spell during your main phase, you can put a 1/1 counter on each creature we have, and then they get vigilance. The reason I have so many of these creatures get indestructible cards in the deck is because token decks are vulnerable to board wipes, right? So if we're like going out on the token plan and someone wipes the board, it's going to be hard for us to reset. If we have like 20 counters on one dude and that guy dies, it's going to be hard to get that many counters back. So it's kind of, we want to make sure we have ways to protect our creatures, especially when a lot of them don't have any inherent protection. Aether Flux Reservoir. You're probably wondering why this card's in the deck. Whenever you cast a spell, gain 1 life for each spell you cast this turn. Pay 50 life, deals 50 damage to target creature player. It's just because at instant speed, we can gain a lot of life for 3 mana using the ability. It moves the counters, it draws us a card, and it gains us life equal to the number of counters that we moved. We start at 40. It's really not that unachievable to hit 50, especially since like our average CMC is like 2, like a low 3, high 2 or whatever, so we can do multiple things a turn. But again, when we're just like, be like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a bunch of dudes and I'm going to pay 3 life and I'm going to move like 10 counters onto this guy and now I'm at like 55 life and I think I'll kill that guy. It's that easy. Arcane Signet, it's just a good mana rock. Horn of Gondor enters the battlefield, make a 1/1 white human, and then we can pay 3 and tap it to make a 1/1 white human soldier equal to the number of humans we control. It just incrementally doubles them up. We can make a lot of humans. It's pretty good. Horn of Valhalla makes white soldiers as the sorcery. Ideally, we're almost always doing the Yisgard's Call before we're hard casting Horn of Valhalla. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. We're a token deck, so that's pretty relevant. It's just a great card overall. Ideally, we're just whipping out a bunch of dudes, and then we can equip it to our commander because he has first strike and he can win with commander damage. It's good all around. Ozolith, the Shattered Spire. If one or more 1/1 counters would be put on an artifact or creature you control, that many of those counters +1 are put on that creature instead, which is really nice because we have a lot of counter stuff. And then we can just pay 2 mana to tap it and then put a 1/1 counter on target artifact or creature we control, which is functionally pay 2 mana, tap it, put 2 1/1 counters on, whatever. And then for some reason it has cycling. Listen, I'm not going to complain, but kind of like why? Like, why does this thing have cycling? Sol Ring is Sol Ring, run it. Don't be a baby. Swiftfoot Boots is great, really just to put on Black Panther, because again, although the deck can win without him, we like him being around. So having him be haste and hexproof, really just the hexproof on any guy we're trying to beef up is good. Talisman of Unity, just because it's a good mana rock, it taps for both of our colors, it's good. The Ozolith is great. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature, which is really good because basically if we beef up a guy and let's say we have like 10 counters on something and then that creature dies, we can then put those counters on the Ozolith, go to combat on the turn, put those counters back on something else. So it's good. Going into enchantments, we have the Felidar Retreat. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, choose one. Make a cat or put a 1/1 counter on the team and give everyone vigilance. It's good either way, right? So we're either having a land enter, making a 2/2, and then making a token, putting a counter onto one of our lands, or we're just putting a 1/1 counter on everything. So it kind of does everything the deck wants. Hardened Scales, just if a 1/1 counter would be put on a creature, that many +1 are put. Which is pretty good. Even just like looking at Felidar Retreat for that example, now all of our creatures get 2 counters in vigilance. Really good. Innkeeper's Talent. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, which is great. Then we can level it up to make it so permanents we control with counters on them have Ward 1. It's relevant that it's permanent because now our lands have ward, which is great. We don't want people blowing up our lands. Then, for 4 mana, if one or more counters will be put on a permanent or player, put twice that many of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. Whew. It just doubles up our counters. That's really it. And it gives us ward, and it goes to combat, and it's going to put 2 counters on something, which is good. Rabble Rousing is great. Hideaway 5 basically says when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of our library, and then exile one of them face down. Whenever you attack with one or more creatures, create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens, which is great because it's just going to essentially replace all of the tokens we just attacked with if they die, and it's going to give us a ton of triggers for land counters. Then if you control 10 or more creatures, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost, which is pretty good. We just get the thing for free. Resourceful Defense is essentially just Black Panther 2.0. It's actually more like 0.5. It's worse. 3 mana. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the target permanent you control, which is excellent. And then we can pay 5 mana to move any number of counters from target permanent you control to another target permanent you control. So we can kind of do the old switcheroo at instant speed. Going into lands, lands are relevant. Blinkmoth Nexus, taps for a colorless. We can also pay 1 to make it a 1/1 flying artifact creature. So, and then we can tap it, but we're probably not going to do that. We don't care about Blinkmoth creatures. The interesting thing, right? We put 1/1 counters onto our lands. If we animate those lands, they're now just like those creatures with all of those 1/1 counters. So if we're just starting to load up Blinkmoth Nexus or whatever, and we're like, yeah, we got like 5 counters on it. Like we just pay 1 mana and now we have a flying 6/6, which is great. Cactus Preserve enters the battlefield tapped. Add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. And then, until end of turn, Cactus Preserve becomes an XX green plant with reach and X. Where X is the greatest number of mana value among our commanders. It's still a land. It'd be a 2/2 at face value. For 3 mana, it's a 2/2. Animate the land. It's fine. And then it just gets bigger and bigger. And it has reach for some reason. Canopy Vista is great, really just because we can fetch it and we have a good amount of basics in the deck. Cascading Cataracts is an indestructible land. So if we decide to put counters onto Cascading Cataracts, someone can't just blow up our land because it's indestructible. Cast an Ardent Veil is good just because whenever we feel like it, pay 4 mana, tap it, make a 1/1 human at instant speed. It's a good blocker, puts a counter on a land. It's great. Command Tower because it taps for any of our commander's colors. Crawling Barrens is super sick. Tap it for a green, pay 4 mana, put 2 1/1 counters on it. And then you may have it become a 0/0 elemental if it's still a land. The reason this card I think is so cool is because you don't have to make it a creature that turn. We can just be like, we'll put 2 1/1 counters on this land just for 4 mana. And then if we're worried someone's going to kill it, we don't have to make it a creature. Darksteel Citadel is just another indestructible land that we can load up all of our counters onto. Dryad Arbor is a fetchable creature. It's really cool. So Dryad Arbor, let's say we have, Black Panther on the field, and then we tutor up with Farseek or a fetch land, or not Farseek, 3 visits, Nature's Lore, or a fetch land. We can get Dryad Arbor on the field. Dryad Arbor will then essentially just put a 1/1 counter on itself, which is pretty cool. Field of the Dead, I think, is relevant in this deck, although we're not doing a ton of funny land shenanigans. I mean, we're doing land shenanigans, don't get me wrong, but not like multiple land drop a turn land shenanigans. You know what I mean. Whenever it or another land enters the battlefield under our control, if you control 7 or more lands with different names, make a 2/2. It's really good because that 2/2 is now going to put a counter on something. And we can like do all the tokens. It just makes it's good for our deck. It makes tokens. It helps with lands. It's all around good. Inkmoth Nexus is a great card to put artifacts onto because we can pay 1 mana to make it a 1/1 flying infector until end of turn. Super, super great because if we just put 9 counters on it, it kills someone because it's a flying 10/10 with infect. It's really good. I will say one of the issues with this deck that you do have to be cautious on is when we animate our lands like this, people can kill them. We do not want people to just essentially 2-for-1 our lands, so we got to be cautious with that. Karn's Bastion's great just because it'll just proliferate for 4 mana. It's not that bad, just puts a counter on everything. Lair of the Hydra will enter the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or more lands. It taps for a green, and then we can pay a green and X until end of turn, just becomes an XX green Hydra. It's still a land, and X can't be 0. So basically, for a green and 1, it is a 1/1 plus all of the 1/1 counters on it. Mutavault is still just pay 1, it becomes a 2/2, all creature types, and then again, just if it had counters on it, it gets that many +1/+1. So it's basically nice to be able to animate the lands we're doing. That's kind of what this whole one we're trying to do. Animate the lands, although that when they have counters if we're not moving them around. Restless Prairie enters tapped for whatever color, and then we can pay 4 mana to make it a 3/3 white llama until end of turn, and then when it attacks, our other creatures get +1/+1. It's really good all around because it's a 3/3 with all of the counters that we're putting onto it, and then when it attacks, other creatures get +1/+1, and since we're a token deck, that's going to be a lot of creatures. Stirring Wildwood, kind of the same deal, but worse than the Llama land. Taps any for color, pay 3 mana, make it a 3/4 with reach, which is cool, and then we can beat down with it. Temple Garden, because we have a lot of just basic forests and plains. Temple Garden, Temple Grove, sorry. Temple Garden is just a shock land. It's good. We can fetch it up. Taps for our colors. We have Treetop Village, which is great. Enters the battlefield tapped, and then we can make it pay for 2 mana, make it a 3/3 with trample, plus all the counters on it. Valgavoth's Lair is super good because it's just a land with hexproof, so our opponents can't target it either way. Enters tapped, but yeah, I mean, it's really just because it's a land with hexproof. That's why we like it so much. Windswept Heath is good. Pay 1 mana. Search up for any land. Really, any of those lands are going to be Canopy Vista, Temple Garden, or Dryad Arbor. That's really all it is. And then since we're really fetching 2 lands, I guess it could trigger some of our landfall stuff. Going into basics, we have 7 of each. We're pretty evenly split on the number of lands, or between the colors, I guess. So I believe that's like 35 or 36 lands maybe with MDFCs. Either way, it's still plenty. Thank you guys for watching. Get all the cards you need from the link down below. And as always, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.